My name's Bruce Peck. I'm one of the original founding members of the Collaborative Law Institute here in the metropolitan area of Minneapolis-St. Paul. And I've been involved with the movement since about 1989 when Stu was first pulling people together. I think it was 1991 that we actually incorporated as the Collaborative Law Institute, and have been going strong ever since. And shortly after that, in the early 90s, other locations and other people started coming on board. I think you came on in around 1995 or thereabouts. And it was phenomenal because I didn't even know that was taking place myself. I just knew that some people were talking with Stu. And so behind the scenes in other locations, things were percolating. And lo and behold, eventually it just bloomed, and here we saw that there was this tremendous energy throughout the United States, and it had spread into Canada, and now it's gone throughout the world. And the people that have aligned their efforts and energies in it are just absolutely phenomenal. So we've caught up here. We were slow to begin with, but we picked it up in the mid-90s, and we have just a vibrant group going on in Minnesota right now. And it's been just a joy and a thrill to be a part of that. The last case I litigated was in 1993. I had 3 cases that year that went to trial, and I decided that they would be my last 3 cases. And so I have done a few things in the courts, but just like motion hearings and some fairly simple things, and no more trial work. I've been committed to the collaborative law model. Well, actually, since its inception. I started mediating in 1980, so I was doing a lot of mediation coming up to getting involved with collaborative law. And in the last 10 years, I've really had a strong focus on just simply the collaborative cases. We have a marriage and family therapist person at the University of Minnesota named Bill Doherty. And Bill has an international reputation in his works and writings in this area. And he had been doing a program with the Hennepin County Court Services, not Court Services, the Family Court, and was conducting some interviews and surveys with the people that were going through the court process to get some ideas about how things were going for them. And he found just a real surprisingly high number of people that reported on the surveys that they had interest in reconciliation, and that they would have been open to it if there had been any opportunities available for it. So Bill was talking with the presiding judge in Hennepin County, Bruce Peterson, who's a staunch ally for our collaborative law movement, and Bruce suggested that he should contact the collaborative law group to pull some attorneys together to have a conversation and a dialogue about this. So we've been meeting. We'll be meeting actually this afternoon for the 8th time since about February, and spacing out the meetings during that course. And it's been a conversation about what this means and what it looks like and how it occurs. And one of the things that was fascinating for me to see is that virtually all of the attorneys have had situations where people have reconciled from their cases during the process. At some time they get started, and then it twists and turns, and then the case goes away and we never hear from them again. So in part, Bill was interested in finding out more about what happens and how that takes place, because there's been a surprising number of people that have been attracted to reconciliation in spite of us. So we've been in the position of not interfering with it, but we haven't really been in the position of promoting it or being supportive of it or recognizing it or having conversations that bring it out and that help people work through those issues. So it's been a fascinating process to see. We just refer to it as the Reconciliation Project, and it started with about 8 or 9 attorneys, and it's settled down to about 5 or 6 that have been able to attend on a fairly regular basis. I recently submitted a piece for our newsletter on this project, and I was doing research about reconciliation in order to find out more about that. And reconciliation is one of those words that we almost understand. We kind of have a general idea, but there's a little bit of nebulousness with it, and we just, we don't really comprehend it completely. What I'm finding for myself, what's opening up, is a realization that what reconciliation really means is healing. And the Truth and Reconciliation projects, which have most notably in 1995 in South Africa, they had a huge Truth and Reconciliation movement, and they were able to heal a whole nation, albeit there's still a lot of stuff that never gets healed from the atrocities that had been committed. But it changed the scope of how things were going on in that country. And there are similar projects that have been at work in Belfast, Northern Iowa, and Belfast, Ireland, that have just switched that whole experience around, and they have peace there now, where they were warring for years and years. As a matter of reality, the network of spiritual progressives that I mentioned to you earlier that I'm a part of, we have interest in that group to working on doing some kind of a reconciliation project with Native Americans. So the concept of it goes outside of what we talk about it right in our nature of it here. But even when we started this project, for my mind, what reconciliation signified was that parties would get back together and the marriage would be reconstituted, and they would be married and not have the divorce. And since I've been involved in it and participating in a variety of other email listserv correspondence, it's opened up, and I realized that reconciliation itself doesn't presuppose the end result. People could reconcile and still get divorced. I see it now as simply being the healing that takes place so that issues are resolved and people are able to go on their separate ways without the pain and the hurt and the anger and the things that were present for them during their divorce. We're in the conversation to try to understand more about what this means. And the main thing, right now we're focusing only with the attorneys. At some point in time, we'll probably bring in the mental health community because they'll be an important adjunct to work with in this whole process. But right now, we're focusing on looking at the role of the attorney and recognizing what kind of intervention we can have and what kind of questions we can ask and how we can look at this subject to begin with. Interesting, because for my personal experience that I think mirrors a lot of my colleagues, Minnesota now has the requirement, we're a no-fault state for divorce, and the statute requires that there's an irretrievable breakdown in the marriage relationship. That happened in the early 70s, and prior to that they had fault divorce, and you had to find grounds for a divorce. So with this no fault, what we realized that the case law early on had some cases that focused on what happens when if somebody challenges that and says, no, there's not an irretrievable breakdown. And the case law became clear that if one party felt that the marriage relationship had broken down, that was sufficient, and the court could not require somebody to stay in a relationship that they felt to be unhealthy for them.